Okay, this is a voice memo. Today is Thursday, the 8th of October 2025. And what an exciting time to be alive. If you're watching a bit of world theatrics and if you're fully aware and you have worked out that we're watching a movie and the shenanigans that are going on through our controlled media operations are there, not just for our entertainment, obviously, but to awaken us. And those who are cognitive and alert and seeing what's going on in the world are I guess getting a little more vocal now in letting friends, family and co-workers and those people around them, letting them know that, the show is coming to a climax. We've been, I guess, a bit of a rude awakening since COVID-19 started at the end of 2019 when that was kicked off, that whole narrative. And, for those of us who, were sort of, wow, there's something going on here, this can't be a real situation where one sort of bit of a virus or whatever they wanted to call it impacts the world in a similar way, or almost exactly the same way, wherever we are. I'm here to comment on that a little bit, that COVID was a cover for what had already been operating in the background, a silent military operation, to root out the corporate structures around the world that were governments, and the, I guess we can call them the deletes of the world that have wanted to cull the population, cull the herd, and to be honest, had we not seen the intervention by the white hats and the various military operations through the process of COVID, we probably would have had a lot more fatalities had the military not used updated comms and social media comms to alert the autists, if we might want to call them, or those who have pattern recognition, that this was a military operation. There's something going on in the background that not everyone can see. So, it was probably only maybe 5% of the world who were privy to what was going on, or who could see what was happening in the background in terms of military arrests, in terms of putting out communications to those people who could read the comms, and then they could look at things like the Q plan and the Q clock, the Q posts, and then piece together things using gematria and decoding what was happening in the real world, so that we could get that out to the public. What we do know from today, 8th of October, is that Q was operating on a couple of calendars, sometimes using the old Ethiopian calendar, but most of the time using the Julian calendar, so that, when dates come out, this was going to happen on such and such a day, and people looked at it on the normal Gregorian calendar, which is the one we run currently, and they go, nothing happened. But then always, 13 days later, something occurs, and people hadn't worked it out until they said, oh, what if we go back to the Julian calendar? Ah, okay, this makes much more sense. So, yeah, a lot of the operation is based on an old calendar, so it's all part of code. And it's internal to the military, and it's external to, those operatives who are giving comms to the awakened community who have, worked out that Q is a military operation. I'll just comment on Q for a second. It's not new. It's probably an operation that's been going in the background at least since JFK. I'm talking about the JFK that was allegedly assassinated in November in 1963. I'm led to believe, and I'm fairly convinced, that a body double was shot on that day, and that internal operation to silence JFK and put LBJ in, who was a 33-degree Mason and deep state operative. I'm pretty sure JFK, who assembled a group of military officers prior to that date, and they continued or began to plan out or continue to flesh out the plan to eradicate the deletes and deep state operations from the world. So, allegedly, JFK survived that, and he hid in the shadows and operated with in back rooms with his group of generals that included, Douglas MacArthur, Patton from the Second World War, and a lot of generals right up until our current time, including those who were loyal to the Q operation, such as Michael J. Flynn and Admiral Rogers of the Naval Fleet. Navy is probably the highest intelligence, and that's why we've got the JAG group, Judge Advocate General. You might have noticed that military is a bit more present, particularly if you're in the States, and if you're in some of those blue states that are being overrun or given a hard time by, well, they're more than just protesters. They're militant groups, and they're funded by external deep state operatives to continually sow unrest and try and foment civil war in the States. Why is all the focus on America? Well, America was probably the last bastion of this world that hadn't been completely co-opted and brought into line under the deep state initiative. And their plan was, through COVID and through the use of silent weapons for quiet wars, to covertly depopulate the planet and do what they call a biological, financial, spiritual, all sorts of angles on it. But a reset, where they basically cull, 90% of the herd, and it would have been affected, and it would have taken just not that long had the technology been deployed, and it wasn't intercepted by the Q operation and the Q plan. So that operation was to be done clandestinely over many platforms and many different mechanisms. I remember talking about 5G, and 5G, 4G, 3G, they all amount to the same thing. When we talk in the electromagnetic spectrum and the world that runs on frequency, vibration, and light. So think of your body in this context, that you're a collaborative group of cells that are made up of atoms, and that we have a frequency and we vibrate, and the only reason we stay in our current form and don't disintegrate before everyone is because that vibration and frequency holds us all together. And it's a bit like how the universe works. The universe operates on a frequency. Now, that may be difficult for you to understand, but I mean, look at it this way: we are a biochemical being, and if you go to the hospital and you have some tests, and one of the tests are listening to your heart rhythm. Okay, so that's frequency, it's pulse. Listening to your brain function. Sometimes an electrodes are put on a patient's brain or skull to try and listen and maybe map some of the neural networks that fire away. And even with Elon Musk, attempting to bring out something like Neuralink. You know what? That again was part of a deep state initiative. What they wanted was people to be interfaced with a mechanical system, call it the Matrix, if you will, and so that they could be part of the Internet of Things. Now, this is going to sound a little bit shocking, but those of you who indulged in the whole vaccine narrative and ended up getting all your shots and your boosters and everything, you were probably injected with biochemicals that would respond to external electromagnetic frequencies, perhaps even your cell phone, but definitely wireless routers. And we have a lot of electromagnetic frequencies around us. I mean, our whole home, sometimes those people who have done the whole smart thing, self-monitoring, and analytics, reporting technology. So when you talk about a smart fridge, it's there to record your eating habits. It knows what's in your fridge because it's got a camera in there. Because you think, oh yeah, I've got a camera in my fridge, so I can go to the supermarket, then I can just go on the app and look what's in the fridge and go, oh yeah, okay, I'm missing that, I should get that. Well, it's not really for that. I mean, they say it's for your convenience, but it's really so they can see from the ingredients that you're putting into your body, what level of biometrics, biomechanical control, bioelectricity, all of that stuff. So you will have your own biometric signature that is invaded and perhaps even compromised. So, and then we all know that, when you go into the supermarket and on the shelves, everything's got a barcode or a product code or whatever. That's all recorded against you as well. We think when we're going through the checkout, we're just, and everything gets checked out. So that information that we just get a receipt on, so that information is collected as raw data, then it's processed, and it basically gives the people that collect the data, whether it's Coles or Woolies or whoever, that you use your card to pay for things. Obviously, if you pay for things with cash, that's a bit difficult for them to track you. And now you can understand why maybe they want to get rid of cash, because you can't charge money on cash. When you do a credit card transaction or using your card facility at a shop, the bank gets paid. But, if you're using cash, they don't get anything out of that. So, the financial networks, the telecommunication networks, the manufacturers of electronics goods around the world, I mean, they're all working together to create a digital footprint and a digital image of every person on the planet that is using their technology and proximate to their technology gathering systems. So anyway, I've probably gone a bit off track there about the human body being the biomechanical wonder that our source creator has put together. Now I'm going to go off on a slightly different tangent. Our source creator, and you can call him God, him, her, whatever. There's divine masculine, divine feminine. Don't get caught up in the, the whole gender dysphoria. God doesn't give a shit about that, or Source doesn't give a shit about that. But so we're from a divine species, and we have been formed, shaped, created, however you want to call it, with a divine spark, with an imprint or image, as it says in the Bible, in in God's image or in Source's image. We've been created. So they're trying, the deletes and the deep state of the world have been trying to remove this divine spark or suppress it to the point where we become totally ignorant, where we become totally dumbed down and senseless in terms of our soul and our spiritual connection with all things created. So you remember when we had the lockdowns, stay out of the sunlight, you can't leave your home. But you could stay on Facebook all day and listen to all the crap that's on social media at that time that would have been infecting your brain. Plus you're stuck in a building that is highly electrified with electromagnetic radiation, all that sort of thing. Now you may think, oh no, this is just all witchcraft and you don't believe any of that. Well, that's your prerogative, and I'm not going to judge you for that. We're all in a different phase of our existence, and we're all experiencing a different level of interface on this planet. I kind of maybe want to explain it a little bit like this. Imagine, and this will maybe hit home for the people who are into video gaming, but there's probably one way of explaining it. So you're playing a video game and you create your character, as is usually what happens at the beginning of the game. And for whatever reason, we like to personalise that character. Some of us can't be bothered, but, a lot of people love to personalise this character. And we put a little bit of us into that character. We might dress them how we would like to look, give them a certain semblance, create this persona that is a little bit us as we go into the digital world. So we go in and we play this game. So you all know it's us controlling that player as we look into the screen on our computer to control that game. And as we go through the game, we meet other characters in the game. Now, some characters are part of the game. They're part of the process of going through the game and evolving as your character evolves in that game. And so some characters are part of the game. Some characters are in there just as non-player characters. And of course, if you're playing multiplayer, there are other characters just like you in the game. And if you're playing online stuff like that, you're going to interact with them as your character and their character. So if you pull yourself back and you watch this game, you think, okay, I'm controlling this player who goes around inside this digital world and I interact, and my goal is to reach the end of the game, or maybe not so much reach the end of the game, but become the most influential or most sophisticated or most wealthy in some cases, or you've stored up the most rations, or you've built the biggest castle, or whatever the game is. But it's based on achievement and material achievement. Okay, so very much like this world that we live in now, where what's the game? Get out of school. Maybe we go into higher education because we've been led to believe you get a degree or go down that path. You can become someone higher in the social spectrum and get higher paying roles, whether it's in medicine or whether you're running a company or whether you're a chief financial officer, all those, above the blue collar, of course, the industrial workers. So I'm relating this game situation to real life, and now I think you're probably getting part of the analogy. And we come into contact with people in the world that, maybe they vibe with us and they resonate with us, and maybe we're drawn to them because we're on a similar playing level, and we could call it we're on a similar frequency. Now I'm going back to frequency and vibration. and I'm just going to comment a little bit about this. The frequency that we vibrate at is a bit like how the insect world communicates. You know, they work on frequency and vibration. You know, particularly bees, anything that's got a bit of a hive type setup. You know, or a colony type setup, which is very similar to you know, our society. So they have a hive mind and they have a high frequency. So that something comes in to their frequency that's a bit off, you know, they shun it away. So it might be a predator, it might be something, you know, completely benign but foreign. But if it's not their frequency, they will tend to block it out. So we're a bit like that. And we come across people in the world that, you know, we befriend people who reflect back, you know, positive affirmations of us. Oh, you're a really good person. Yeah, I really enjoy being around you. Oh, we've got so much in common. And you can get stuck in that rut. You know, you can have friends who are, you know, who are just there, really. They like your company because they get something from you. But after a period of time, you know, the friendship goes a bit stagnant because you realise you're not growing. You know, you're doing the same shit. You know, the same conversation goes round and round and round. And it's kind of like, and, you know, this is the point of when you're starting to awaken. You know, you're realising that, hey, wait a minute. This is so monotonous, so deja vu, like I've been here before, like I'm in this loop. And your frequency's not changing. You're not being challenged. There's no one in your sphere of influence that is, you know, challenging your paradigms or your goals or things that you hold to be true. So going back to the game scenario, so let's say we're in this slightly elevated, awakened state and we pitch a question or, you know, or soliciting an answer from one of whom we think are our friends. But a lot of these friends, I mean, I'll just call it out, you know, a lot of our friends are sometimes just energy vampires. They don't have any real opinions of their own. And if they do, they're just regurgitated, parroted stuff from, you know, media, social media, you know. None of their ideals or ideologies originate in them. It's just like an AI, you know, just regurgitating what's in the world of the internet. So I say that to say this. We are going to meet a lot of non-player characters in our journey. NPCs in the video games where you have a very shallow conversation, go up to this player in the game and they go, hey, I was told to meet you. Oh yeah, what about? Or, you know, or they'll just go, I've got nothing to say here. So there's a lot of these real people in the world that are just so inured. You know, if you go back to The Matrix, that great movie that was actually a documentary, and if you understand the symbolism and if you can connect the dots of that movie, you realise that we're in very much that situation, or at least we have been, where the deletes of the world, deep state, cabal, mafia, all of those three-letter groups, not NGOs, whatever, they're all collaboratively working together to maintain power, profit, and control. That's all they're worried about. And all they've got to do is send signals into the rest of the 8 billion people, you know, and control that hive mind. And if they can keep control of that hive mind, they can keep repeating this process of, you know, let society develop to a certain era, to a certain phase and stage where, oh, okay, we've got too many waking up. We've got to do a reset. Because if they don't reset everything, now they can reset themselves. They can reimprint themselves, reinvent themselves. All they've got, you know, 500-year bloodlines. where they can just intermarry within their own groups and keep the elite dynasty alive and that elite program of the cabal going. Now, you might say, well, this is fantasy, and look, you're perfectly at liberty to believe exactly what you want, and if you're happy in this world and you've found where you are in this world to be, and you're at peace with it, I have no arguments. You found something that is okay for you, whether it's sitting at home watching the TV, sitting around with friends, drinking alcohol until you pass out, just doing the 9 to 5 and the drudgery. And if you're happy with that, look, that's fine. And you don't want to challenge that, or you're not looking for anything new, that's fine also. So, I'm not judging anyone who just finds the social norms of this world, to be enough for their appetite. That's fine. You're here for a reason too. Just like in the game, there are all of those characters in that game for a reason, and it's a part of your personal evolution, your spiritual development, and finding your real soul. So you can evolve, and you can awaken to what your real potential is, to what your purpose is. Because I've discovered, and it may not be everyone's discovery, but a life without purpose just seems to be aimlessly wandering through a desert, where we say about deserts. In the desert there is nothing, and no man needs nothing. It's like a wasteland, and no one to communicate with. You're without your natural survival ingredients. You need water, you need shelter. You're not going to have a good time if you're just in a wasteland or in a desert. So a lot of people are in this area where they're almost soulless, and they're just happy to wander in the desert and be non-communicable and not even have contact with people very often. We call them hermits, or just really private people. Now it could be on the other end of the scale that they are just so switched on that they can see the world for what it is, and they don't want to be involved in modern society the way it is because they just don't fit in. And there are definitely those. So they're the ones that break the matrix, like the Neos in the show, that they realise finally what their power is, and their power is of realising that we're part of this creation, that we can vibe and resonate with other parts of the creation, whether they be other people. So finding other people, or whether it's just nature, animals, because we've all seen those old movies that, where Tarzan and, all these movies, Sheena of the Jungle and all that, where, humans and animals sort of have this, almost telepathic connection. That might be you as well. And there are lots of people in the world who are really good at working with animals because they have a really deep understanding and a calm and sensitive approach to working with animals who I appreciate. All right, so where we are, we're back to our game. We're reflecting on comparatives like the movie The Matrix, and then we're pulling that back into real world. We've talked about NPCs, and now I'm going to go and look at the complexity of the game. All right, so now you've realised you're playing this game, and you're controlling it from the outside. You can turn it off and on again, as a player. But there's more levels to the game now. Now, what if you can now bring in external to the game modifications that make you, bigger, stronger. You've got levels above what the other characters have got in the game and above what the other players have got. So you've learned how to manipulate the game. All right? So, and a lot of games have these add-ons, and you can buy character upgrades and all that sort of thing. So that puts you ahead of the curve in the context of all other players. So I equate that to, doing some research and educating yourself on how the game works and how you can get above and get ahead of the game. Now, if you know that it's just a game, and if you know that you can get an advantage, fair or unfair, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's unfair if you're self-educated and you've researched and you've found a position that allows you to become a more powerful player, a more efficient player in this game. I think that's a good thing. Isn't that what we strive for? And we call that self-improvement in the real world. So, okay, so we've got to that level in the game, and now we look at that in real world. So let's not just look at education as going to university. I mean, I have a lot of friends in university, and they call themselves intellectual. And you can be well educated, but you can still be, quite uneducated in some other areas. And I'm not saying everyone is, but, you can, I looked at it like this. The universities have created so many different curriculums and so many different courses that, ultimately you learn more and more about less and less until you know absolutely everything about nothing that matters. Now, that's not entirely true of everything. I agree with that. But, it's kind of like, if you look at schools and how they're constructed and how the curriculum is there to basically push a narrative, an education platform that all the kids learn exactly the same thing, exactly the same day of the week, and they go through this very regimented education stream. And in the class you'll find a few that, daydream a lot. You'll find a few that really struggle, to keep up with the rest of the class. But the majority of the class kind of conform. Now, this conformity, that it's really programming. It's, we're not worried about the 5% that, daydream and are off with the fairies. We're not worried about the 5% that really struggle. We'll make it look like we are. We're worried about the 85 to 90% that are, going to be programmed to continue after they leave school, head into university and enter the workforce to follow societal rules of conformity so that they become productive. You like the word productive, and out of that word productive is the word product. So they become a product of the education system. And that is what schools are about, creating a product. All right? And if you think about in terms of the way the elites, deletes, cabal, or whatever you want to call them, run the world, they want a product. Because a product can be data-driven. It can be data-matched. A product can be scripted. A product can be tracked. So that's what we're looking at. And it's a little bit inhumane to think of it that way, but humanity is a product to them. And now I'm going to go a little bit further. And if you're unfortunate enough to be involved in an accident, whether it's a car accident, you fall off a building or whatever, and you wind up in hospital, now they're going to look at how do we salvage this product? Is there, and if you're sort of in that area where, I don't think they're going to make it, the hospitals will make a decision based on what part of this product can be salvaged and reused or repurposed, in terms of human organs. All right, and you might say, that's pretty gruesome and pretty grotesque, but we volunteer for this in our license. We say, would you like to be an organ donor? Oh, yeah, sure, but I'm dead. I don't need to. What do I need organs for? But here's the thing. There's a possibility and a high likelihood that that situation can be exploited. And you can end up, as a sub-product on the shelf, or, not long on the shelf if it's heart, lung, liver, kidneys, whatever. And the hospitals can repurpose those parts. And, and I'm sorry, but it's a for-profit venture. Most hospitals are. They may not look it on the outside, but you've got to pay the staff somehow. And we say it all comes out of tax dollars. Oh, that's another story. But your tax dollars don't always go where you think they go. That's to serve the great big black purse of our very dark masters, the elite, the cabal, all of those people you want to talk about. All right. And again, I know this isn't for everyone, this kind of conversation, and I apologise if you're feeling a bit unsettled. But this is how things would run. And, if you want to extrapolate that further, then the reason we're seeing the global upheavals that we've got at the moment, the many wars, I'll go into wars and conflict for a minute. What do you think happens in conflict? We get a lot of casualties. We get a lot of bodies. Some of those bodies, they may be well and truly dead and not useful for any product replacement or product placement. Like nothing can be harvested from that. Now I'm going to go on to another step. With wars, there's a lot of social displacement. A lot of humanity gets moved from their homes, lost through the cracks, moved to different villages, tent cities, whatever, and children go missing, families go missing, and you're going to where do all these people go? What happens to them? Well, I think, there's only one real way to explain it, is that they end up in the human processing situations where, they're deemed worthy of being either repurposed or whether they go into a form of slavery through human trafficking. And that's the sad and the nefarious and the dark and sinister part of what happens with displacement of society when countries go to war. And this has been going on for centuries, but very prolific, in probably the last 50, 60 years when the medical and pharmaceutical companies have worked out that human products and some human products are worth a lot more than just standard run-of-the-mill pharmaceuticals. I'm going to run off on a section with pharmaceuticals. Okay, so the pharmaceutical companies are primarily there to create a lifelong subscription for as many subscribers as they can on the planet. And the unfortunate truth is, for them, is that a patient cured is a customer lost. So they're not interested in curing anyone. They're only interested in you being a lifetime subscriber and you being on their medications forever. And if they've got to create a new, mental dysphoria, which is what a lot of the trans movement is. And if you find someone who's transgendered, I'm not picking on these people. They've been victims themselves. But they're usually on a lot of medication, and they've had to take a lot of medication to, as part of their gender dysphoria. Anyway, So, when you think about the military or wars, and then you think about pharmaceutical industry, you think about finance. So who profits? Like wars cost money. But the other thing is, wars make money because now you go into a country, you take over their infrastructure, you now look at what assets they've got. So have a guess of, a lot of the wars that have happened in the last 100 years. Countries don't invade other countries unless there's something to gain. Once they kill all their people, what's there? Is there anything left that's profitable? If there's nothing there that's of value, no resources, or whether they're in ground or above ground, whether it's rich farming land, or whether there's something about that country that has a dollar value, it's kind of like, you're not going to go from your 3-story mansion and invade your neighbour next door who's got a caravan on a vacant lot and go, yay, we've now taken over the caravan and left our 3-story mansion. It doesn't make sense. I don't know whether that's a good comparative, but anyway. I've digressed a lot. Okay, so I'm going to try and round up everything I've rambled on about, and if some of this has made sense, I'm grateful. If not, well, let's think about an overall picture at the moment. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the Q movement, and it's a military operation. It has been since JFK, and probably beforehand. I would imagine since the JFK movement, and it's obviously gathered speed. Then JFK Jr., his son, who allegedly disappeared in June 1999 as he was running for the New York Senate against Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, I also believe JFK Jr. is still alive. He has a couple of different personas, but he regularly presents himself as 107 or 107, JUANOSAVIN or IUN or something like that. And he puts on a big person's outfit, so he's got and facial hair, and usually you see his boots, but sometimes you see his ring, and the ring's important if you want to investigate that. So between him and obviously Trump is involved. So I mean, he's been put into that position by the military, and the military supported him in that position. They asked him to run for president in probably about 2014, 2015, maybe even earlier. But they said, look, you've got to win, but you've got to win fairly. So what Trump did, he went to all the middle states in Central America, and he just did rallies and talks. And he got most of Middle America, so the East Coast and the West Coast, like California and New York and all those very influential parts of the country. They got a lot of votes, but when it came down to it, and their manipulation of the voting system, and let's face it, it was manipulated back in 2016, but Trump broke the algorithm. So he got into power, fully supported by the nation's military and the military generals and the people who were part of the Q military operation. So that operation continued right through from his presidency as president number 45. And I will say this, that America had always been a British colony. It had never transferred, and that's why you've seen a couple of times where Trump has gone into Great Britain and had audience with the Queen, and just recently the alleged King, and he walked in front of them and you know that's never been accepted in terms of royal etiquette. The reason he did that, because he was superior to them. They were actors, he knew that, and that the monarchy was really there just for show. There hasn't been a legitimate monarchy in Britain since before Queen Victoria. So if you maybe research that, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who was really a bit of a shill from Germany, and Queen Victoria was never given a Parliament did not want to ascend to the throne as the monarch. But anyway, I digress. Back on track. So our military program had allowed COVID to happen in 2019, 2020, and had allowed the puppet government of Biden and the auto pen to run, with Trump running in the background as the commander-in-chief. So he allowed the de facto government, corporate government of the United States to continue to run, and to allow things to get so bad so that people would start to arc up and start to ask questions, like, oh, who is this Joe Biden? Why does he look different? Hang on. Some of the players who are in government, they seem to have changed somewhat, and you look at them and think, okay, facial recognition software, and that's really easy to get a hold of these days, and you compare faces with faces, like Mike Pence. That was not the same Mike Pence that continued on with the Trump administration. But definitely Joe Biden, like he'd been played by several actors. Some people woke up to it, and some people just so asleep they didn't care or didn't even notice. So 45 through to 47, it's called a continuation of government, and that happens when government is so compromised that the military enacts powers to continue government under military supervision, and that's exactly what's happened. So, and some of those executive orders have been followed up because the military will continue to support the Constitution. They don't support a leader, they will support the Constitution, which supports the people. So here we are, present day. We are now on the edge, on the cusp of a new global financial system. Maybe you might have heard that before, a quantum financial system or a reset or something like that. We are very close to this. It is going to be based on new crypto technology, because that technology is just so much more sophisticated and has a lot more cross-border capability than the old SWIFT transfer system. Why do I know this? Well, you probably would have seen things like OSCO, PayID, things like that that have come into your banking, your everyday banking networks that make things paying anywhere in the world almost instantly, within 20 seconds. Yes, some of those things run on the backbone of the old Visa and the old MasterCard system, but I think those will eventually phase out as well. We'll have them for a little longer. But mostly now we're coming into an era where most governments are getting on board with a crypto called XRP or Ripple, with an underlying stable coin or payment crypto transfer system, Stellar Lumens. And then we might get other little cryptos that can operate really well, HBAR, all of those. I'm not a crypto expert. I'm just letting you know what I know at this stage. And a lot of us, who are in my age group, 60s and above, have no inclination or, and very little knowledge about the crypto world. But that's going to come in very big. We're all worried about biometrics. Okay, what does that mean? And this new ID system. Don't be afraid of that, everyone. We are going to have a new ID system, and it's going to get rid of or transcend all of the old other ones. And it's going to put everyone on an everyday and equal playing field. So your DNA, your biometrics, is you, and you're going to be sovereign again. So you're not going to be a product, like I've explained in the pharmaceutical or the medical world. You're not going to be a product any longer. You are going to be your own sovereign, supportive system when this new financial system goes online. And you're gonna have plenty. Don't worry. The amount of energy and equivalent to that energy, the amount of money that the old system has raped and pillaged and stored has been all retrieved, and there's trillions and trillions and trillions of what we understand to be dollars, or our current financial system. So you're going to be okay. Don't worry about that. Stop worrying about money. Yes, when things go dark shortly, and that's why I'm making this audio. When things go dark shortly, you may notice. You won't have access to your digital funds for a few days. But don't worry about your savings, like your savings, your home, maybe assets that you have in the stock market. I'm not sure about. I can't say that they're safe. That may get scrubbed. I don't know. But there is a financial calamity, and it's a wake up. It's a scare event. Okay, it's a wake up. Just get everyone on board. Oh, what's going on? And they're all going to blame Trump, or they're all going to blame Albo in Australia, and say, what happened here? Why didn't they see it coming? Well, they all knew it was coming, and it's kind of like we have to get the public to recognise that there is now a transition of power. We're taking power away from the deletes, taking power away from your de facto government that has, just ruled over you tyrannically, and we're giving it back to the individuals of the world so that they now can decide how they want to live, what rules they want, and your digital or biometric ID is going to be all part of that. Like we talked about a social credit system where, if you didn't agree with someone, you had a fight with something, you got a fine, you transgressed the law somehow, that would reduce your social credit score, and you wouldn't be able to get certain things in society. It was a bit like that test phase in COVID. If you didn't get a jab, you couldn't go and enjoy yourself and go to concerts or the footy. Anyway, so we've got an event coming. It could have something to do with this 3i Atlas. Certainly they're going to spin that. Who knows? But I just really recommend, don't be fearful. Our good friends who have been running this operation for decades and decades and decades have obviously they haven't catered for everyone and everything, but for the large portion of us. And we're going to be as safe as possible. So when shit does go down and we maybe get instructions across the internet, if they shut the internet down, it'll just be probably direct communication via Starlink, which I think will be the platform of the future, or at least part of it. So we'll get communications telling us to, just sit tight. Essential services will be on. You'll still be able to, have the water turned on to your home. You'll still have electricity. But we may be forced to stay indoors for a number of days. Could be 3, 4, 5 days, or stay within our property. At which time, I'm led to believe that there will be a broadcast of documentaries of exactly what I've talked about and how humanity has been systematically and collaboratively and sinisterly compromised, and how they've created a matrix of systems around us to keep us independent, keep us dependent on their system, so that they could continue to have power, profit, and control. So that'll all be exposed. There'll be some key figures, I'm sure. Everyone's waiting for the key figures, like Obama, Clinton, the Royals, but there's far more people. There's probably far more people outside of those circles that have had more influence. The 13 families of Europe, the 13 British, or the British royal families, and the 13 bloodlines of the Americas, all those sort of things. Those sorts of peoples and the dynastic families. All right, so we may be forced to be indoors now. Projection of this date, like I talked about, different calendars. Like we've always been told within the military movement, via comms, through Q and all that, not to expect it on a particular date, but don't hold me to it. But if we're operating on the Julian calendar, we're about a week away now. So being the 8th today, another 7 days is 15th. Allow for different time zones or whatever. So if it happens on about the 13th or 14th in America, so the 13th of October will be September 30th in the Julian calendar, and all the money stops. And we'll be told that there's a bank holiday. There's certain banks already scheduled to be closed for 24 to 48 hours. You may get emails shortly that your bank is having a day off or 2 days off. It's more than likely going to be over a weekend, who knows? So it could be a shutdown on Friday. Now, next Friday, I think, is the 17th. Could be that day. Who knows? But we're so close. If I'm wrong, so be it, but everything else I've talked about, it's pointing to a narrowing timeline where these things are going to happen, where the whole world resets. We're going to have a new financial system. We're going to go back to common law, so all of the admiralty law, the maritime law, the law of the courts, contract law, corporate law, all of that is going to be. That may not all disappear, but the supreme law of the land will be common law and God's law, source law. So it is basically this, you live your life how you want, but don't harm anyone in doing so, and everyone will be happy. Which is an old, a very old law from what they used to call a law in some of the early witches' covens. I don't believe that there will. There are evil people, and yes, you can use certain powers and influences to do evil. But in the early days, where the Roman churches went around hunting for witches, these people were just wanted to do their thing and live according to their own laws that were written on their hearts, and practice herbal medicine. And they had a saying: "Do what thou wilt, but harm none." So that I think that's going to fit in with the first tenet of law around the world. You can live life how you want, but just don't harm anyone in doing so. All right, so we will have a maybe brief shutdown. People are going to get to see documentary series of what's happened in the world. It'll be a little bit historical. It's going to be an oh fuck moment for a lot of people. For those of us who've been watching this, and I've been part of this movement since, I reckon, late 90s, when I started to recognise things were not as they should be. And there was certainly, by the time the Twin Towers went down in 2001, I recognised that for what it was straight away. This was targeted at America. It was targeted at reconstruction of their government and their laws, and it was designed to twofold: to wake up the sleepers, and secondly, for the cabal and the deep state to start putting in, more constrictive laws so that they could eventually destroy America from within by infiltration and invasion. Just like that speech prior to his death by John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963. Okay, so we're going to come out of this maybe short period where everything goes dark, so internet off, phones off, phone networks down, all that sort of thing. What's going to happen from there? Look, I'm told that we will be issued a new smart device, a new phone. So yeah, don't go and get a new phone right away. Put up with your old one for a few more days, because you may not need it beyond then. Might end up being a paperweight. Who knows? So the telecommunications systems are going to change. Financial systems are going to change. All those sorts of things, and medical systems are going to change. I don't know what you're seeing right now. Big Pharma's getting a very big prod, and I think you've already worked out that if you haven't by now, that the whole COVID thing was not only a disaster in terms of human health and casualty, but it was a test. A program to see how many people would, roll their sleeve up and get an experimental jab, and then follow all the orders that went with it. You can't go out, you can't leave your house, you can't say anything wrong, and people getting arrested for saying things on Facebook and all sorts of nonsense. All right, so the pharmaceutical system is probably going to get a bit of a routing. We're going to change the way we address human physiology and biology, and as I said before, we're going to work out our biology through new mechanisms that will look at frequency and vibration, and really sickness in any system, whether it's a biological system or an electronic system, is something that is malfunctioning or is out of sync or out of balance within that system, and that's what ill health is. If our body is not performing, if we're falling ill, then there's something that is not in balance within our system, and that's all it is. Cancers are just chemical problems within our body, biological problems within our body that our body is out of sync. We've stored up things in our body that have gone, almost toxic, and the only way for our body to eject toxicity is to create a cancerous streak. Try and isolate those bad cells and create cancerous growth. Anyway, so important things in our chat so far, and I've gone for just on an hour. Let's just wrap it up with this. Whatever happens over the next days, weeks, months, I don't know the transition timeline, how long these new things will take to transition. I did see the Trump administration release a brief clip on medbeds, and there's a lot of stuff on social media about medbeds. So I can assume from that a lot of scientific folk, medical folk have already been trained in those areas, and there are facilities already up and operational, ready to accommodate the public, particularly those who are in dire need medically, those who are suffering the worst, the elderly, children, obviously the military, then, general health. So health checkups now, we can go into a clinic, jump into one of these medical beds, lie down for 15-20 minutes, and we'll get a full diagnostic and realignment, and hopefully that will be the way most illnesses are treated in the future, rather than just prescribing a cabinet full of drugs. All right. So when things go dark, when they go dark, if they go dark, I'm sure they will. Don't be fearful. Just make sure you've got a bit of food at home. If you haven't, I guess you're gonna have to knock on the door of the neighbours. Start talking to your friends who you think are absolute conspiracy nuts. You might get a few pointers from them. They may not sound so out there and off the planet now. Do some research. I do recommend people look. There's a series that you can still watch now. It's on YouTube by a lady from the Netherlands. I can't remember her friend's or co-star's name, but they put together a series called Fall of the Cabal. They started putting this together in 2018 and started releasing it towards the end of 2019, I think. And it's a marvelous presentation. It gives you it doesn't give you a lot of facts and figures, but it gives you a very good landscape, overall view of what's been happening in the world and the role of the Q movement and the deep state, and how they've systematically been taking down the evil cabal across these last 5-6 years. Okay, so don't be fearful. Make sure you're stocked up on some food at home. I believe this Signal, someone told me the Signal app will work, but then you've got to have, maybe that will interface with Starlink, I'm not sure. If you've got Starlink, it may be okay, I don't know. There's something else that I've been told, because that's a military app. May work, so you may be able to be in contact with your relatives and friends through the Signal app. Don't quote me, but that's just what I've heard. So don't be fearful. You're going to be forced to watch shit because there'll be nothing else on the TV other than, these documentaries of how the military have taken down the global networks that have caught us in their matrix. So that'll be interesting. There'll be some key figures, but most of it is about, I guess, NGOs and things like the World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, all those three-letter NGO non-governmentals organizations around the world. So you'll see all of those, the Klaus Schwabs, etc., etc., etc. So once you get through this phase, and I think it'll be a bit of a shocking wake up, you're going to learn some really hideous things about where all the children have gone, the ones that have gone missing. You're going to learn some really hideous things about them. When I talked about human beings being a product, you're going to understand that a lot more. I will say this. No, we are not alone in this universe, and the people that have created us, Source, God, whatever you want to call it, those beings have been benevolently watching and waiting for us to rise to this moment, to stop continuing the cycle of, basically being a product for our slave masters. Okay, I'm going to finish it there, and remember who you are. Remember who we are. Remember who our Creator is, and rest in that knowledge that we're all connected energetically, biologically, and spiritually, and that we have far more in common than we realise. I wish everyone listening to this, or who does listen to it, good health, and if you're in poor health, then I wish good health comes to you soon. Remember that acting in love is your highest calling, that where you can offer assistance and help other people out, that has a benefit far greater than you receiving accolades. All right, I'm going to sign out now, and hopefully I'll get to do an update in the next few days as things start to crystallise more. Love to all.